People pay good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth.
Everyone pretend podcasting isn't boring.
Turn it off. Turn it off.
Would you fasten your seatbelt, please? We're about to land.
And keep it fastened. For you are about to be jolted into a new realm of suspenseful terror.
Who are you? What do you want?
Your destination, a house on a lonely stretch of beach in France. Time, the night of the following day.
Oh, please, let me go.
Nothing grips the imagination. Nothing matches the excitement. Nothing builds in suspense. Like a good, hard-hitting crime movie. And here is one of the best.
You wanna...
Shut up.
Listen to me, man. If you want to get freaky, you don't do it with her.
The night of the following day, fear seeks a way out.
I want out of this thing, man! You're crazy! You're gonna get us all killed!
Brando. Here's the old magic. The romantic star. The lean adventurer. Hungry for excitement. Richard Boone. Here and now, the living image of a sadistic killer.
Don't let anything happen to my little girl.
The night of the following day, love seeks a way out, and a kidnapped girl sees no way out.
I got him on the line.
On the line, but no one is off the hook.
Look, this is gonna be a one-way conversation. You listen. You understand? Just listen.
All I've got is that little girl and old locking bar.
If I come back and I find that she's not all right, I'm gonna take that burp gun and I'm gonna jam it up your nose. And I'm gonna pull the trigger till it doesn't work anymore.
As sure as night follows day, this startling motion picture will create a new must-see. A compelling must-know about what happens to all of these people in the different and daring crime thriller, The Night of the Following Day.
Welcome to the Projection Booth. I'm your host, Mike White. Joining me once again is Mr. Adam Schartoff.
Hi, Mike. It is so great to be back, Mike. It's great to have nothing but wonderful memories of my handful of appearances on the Projection Booth, and I'm just excited to be back on after all this time. Thank you for having me.
Also joining us as a co-host, though he is once a guest, is Mr. Joseph Aisenberg.
Hey, I'm very honored to be on here. I listen to the show all the time, and it's glad that people just want to hear me jabber.
On this episode, we are going to be talking about the 1969 film The Night of the Following Day, also known as Saturday, at least today it is, directed by Hubert Cornfield. The film is based on Lionel White's novel The Snatchers, where the kidnapping plot was so ingenious that some French criminals used it to abduct the heir to Peugeot. Ironically, the film would be moved from New York over to France, and stars a lot of Americans like Marlon Brando, Richard Boone, and Rita Moreno. This episode was requested by our Patreon supporter, Vaughn Kohlmeyer. So if you're not Vaughn Kohlmeyer, or if you don't want this movie spoiled for you, please turn off the podcast and come back either after you've seen the movie or have become Vaughn Kohlmeyer. So Adam, when was the first time you saw The Night of the Following Day, and what did you think?
This was my first time. I'd seen clips of it, like some documentaries. It was film that I had been looking forward to seeing for a long time. But it's not a film that makes it onto one's radar too often. Otherwise, it's not really that well known in the Brando oeuvre. So this is my first time. Works for me as an oddity, as a curiosity in his career more than anything else. And it worked because it's just such a stunning movie to look at, and because the people in it, the actors in it, are just so great.
And Joseph, how about yourself?
This is the first time I saw it too. I'd come across it reading about Brando, and I think I read Pauline Kael's really main review of it and saw it, and I had basically had two reactions. I had my movie review action, which is this is not a successful kidnapping movie and doesn't really work. And then also kind of like Adam, it's it is really interesting to look at, and it's very distanced and strange. And if it had been done on purpose, I think that might be interesting.
Well, I think some of it was done on purpose. Some of it feels very much like Cornfield is trying to inject some French New Wave type stuff into this. It's ironic because I was under the impression that this was Cornfield's first movie just because it feels that way. But then to look at his filmography, it's no. He'd been around the block. He had made some films noir beforehand, like Proper, Plunder Road, Sudden Danger, things that I was kind of familiar with. And then this comes out years later. Those were early 60s. This is 69. And it feels so sloppy sometimes. And I think a lot of that is because of him dealing with this very temperamental Brando. Brando, we've heard horror stories before, and it feels like this was just filled with horror stories.
The commentary track the director did in 2005, he revealed all kinds of terrible things that Brando did.
I tried to sleep with your wife.
And the fact that that guy didn't immediately dismiss him and fire him, even before that, really, he was already being a butt even before it.
I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the financing was based on the casting of Brando. So there was no firing Brando. There was only going to be firing, the director, if anything. But I'm just thinking, was this do you think, an earlier project where since he had such control, Brando was already in a career slump, but he still had an incredible amount of control, is my guess. And my assumption is that I was wondering rather if he had already been exercising this control by not memorizing scripts. He insisted on getting the ideas, the thrust of the scene, but he was going to improvise the dialogue. And I wonder, is this maybe one of the first examples of this where he did that? It had to be incredibly hard to work with. Who else did that? Back in 69.
Right. Well, he was already not memorizing lines all the way back into his work with Elia Kazan. Like the whole thing of him looking around in the back of the car when he's there with Rod Steiger is him looking for lines, like literally looking for lines. I don't think that they used cue cards on this. I think it was much more the try to get the gist of this across. There's one whole scene in here, which is probably one of the longer scenes and one of the longer dialogue scenes that was not even directed by Cornfield, that Brando insisted that Richard Boone direct him. And that's the whole scene of Brando and the guy who is actually the ringleader of the group. And it takes me so long to figure out that he's the ringleader of the group. Jess Hahn is, well, this is difficult because all of these character names are not character names. Friendly is the character name, but that's not his name. I think it's Wally in the movie. The credits, they're all listed as like chauffeur, blonde, girl. Richard Boone is the only one that gets a name, and that's really more of what he does, which is Lear. And I thought for sure that Richard Boone was the leader of the group from the way that the movie plays out, only to find out, no, it's just Han that is actually the one that's in charge of things, but he seems to be in charge of two things, which is Jack and shit.
But that happens on movie sets too, right, Mike? I mean, you have the director, they're supposed to be in control, but as we know, a star like Brando, and I'm not sure that's the case here, is actually the one who's running the game. So you may think, the director is, but in fact, it's not always the case, So that the dynamic, you're right, is it could be, it could be anybody's guess on a project like that.
In that scene you're talking about that Boone directed too, See, I was kind of confused by the movie from the beginning. So it wasn't so surprising to me when it turned out that guy was the leader, because I didn't really get entirely what was supposed to be going on for a while. But I was more confused by stuff they say in the meeting. Like when, what is his name? Brando starts talking about how he saw Boone smacking the crap out of Pamela Franklin and slamming her head against the wall. And you're like, that didn't happen. What are you talking about? We saw the whole thing.
That happened. I watched it happen. I saw it happen. Don't tell me it didn't happen.
Thank you so much, because, yeah, I was saying the exact same thing to myself, to the point where I went back and rewatched that scene a few times just to be like, I'm not seeing what you said you saw, Marlon Brando. What is happening here?
Well, according to one of the commentaries you gave us, they filmed that scene first, the scene when Boone directed, and then later filmed the scene with Pamela Franklin on the stairs. And I guess he wasn't able to get all of that in it, and so they cut around it, and that's why it doesn't match up. There's so much stuff like this in that movie.
It's a strange movie. This was a first-time watch for me as well. I remembered when this movie came out on VHS, and just from the cover image of the VHS, I almost rented it way back when. I'm kind of glad I didn't, but I am glad that I've seen it now. I can't say that I like this movie, but I appreciate it. I appreciate what he's trying to go for, he being Cornfield in this one. The whole idea of the lack of dialogue and how much of this movie plays out like a silent film. I really like that. I like how much of this has no dialogue. And I do like, and we'll be talking about the ending, but I like the cyclical ending. It's kind of a neat little gimmick that they're doing in here. But yeah, some of it works for me and some of it doesn't work. I have watched this a few times over this week, and there are things where I'm like, okay, yeah, this is pretty good. It's nice to see Richard Boone as a total shitheel, though he starts off though so nice, so that when he becomes a shitheel, it's like, was he always supposed to be this way? Or yeah, that's one area of confusion for me, where I was like, okay, it feels like Lear, the Richard Boone character, is like the benevolent father of the group, but then it ends up he's like the psycho other that comes into the group. Like that's also something that's revealed in that scene that we're talking about with Jess Hahn.
But it's also, Stockholm doesn't really even matter if your kidnapper, your abductor treats you very well or not, because eventually you just sort of succumb to this syndrome where you grow to trust or, give over your control to the abductor. But here seems like it's his way of trying to, mind effing, mind fucking with the girl, the young kidnap victim here. I don't know. I saw very quickly that he was up to something, but I wonder, like, there may have been so many ideas, like, for characters, like, Richard Boone's maybe had this whole idea that he had worked out about his character. And then because of the way the film ends up kind of failing, there's a lot of confusing elements, in other words, that don't quite work out, because I think it seemed as though they were in a rush to finish the film, or, who knows? But it seemed like, they start off with all these best intentions, with plans for how maybe the characters should be fleshed out, like Richard Boone did. And then, because I think of the instability on the set, and that's our guess here, things didn't necessarily always work out that way. Perhaps they were in a rush to get through the film. Who knows? Money was running out,
It felt like there were some contradictions in the audio commentaries. You've got the two commentaries on there, one with the director and one with Tim Lucas. And it sounded like Lucas was saying that Brando was a last-minute addition and almost took over the role that Boone was supposed to play. That Boone maybe was the chauffeur. I don't know. That's how it sounded to me. And then Cornfield kind of contradicted that by saying, once Brando got on board, then we had a motion picture, and then we went on from there. So it's like, which was it? Because there are times where it feels like maybe they swapped characters or something, but at the same time, it was always going to be Brando as the seducer-ish of the girl, even though apparently he cut the legs out from the whole production by refusing her advances in the scene where she comes on to him. Because she comes on to him, I think, twice maybe, but definitely for sure one time more towards the end. And he's just like, you don't have to do that, and just kind of cut the legs out from under the picture, because suddenly it's like, no, there should have been a love affair. Pamela Franklin should have had more to do, but instead it becomes really more of him, Brando with Violet, the Rita Moreno character, which is fine, because I think they have a lot of chemistry. And really, for me, it's more their story than it is about the kidnapped girl.
But I mean, it is a problem that you have a movie about a kidnapped girl and you don't care at all about her. She's not developed as a character. You have, there's a scene that this reminded me of a film called The Collector by William Wyler. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it, but Samantha Eggar gets kidnapped by creepy psycho Terrence Stamp so that he can treat her respectfully. It's very strange. And there's a scene where he gives her a bath, and she takes the bath. And while she's taking the bath, a guy who lives the nearby property comes through, and it's the suspenseful scene where you're like, you hope she'll get away, but it's also got that Hitchcocky thing of where you're slightly identified with Terrence Stamp, and you're like, oh no, it's going to ruin his weirdo plan. And that scene happens exactly in this movie too, but you don't care. Like, you're not worried for Pamela Franklin. You don't really care if it stops the kidnapping plot. It just happens. And you're like, oh, this is that scene that's supposed to be suspenseful. And the whole movie's like that. It's abstract. This is for that. This does that. But you don't feel any of it ever. Or I didn't.
Yeah, it was very tough to feel for Pamela Franklin, even though she is supposed to be our main character. We start the movie with her. And, well, yeah, is it her dream? I mean, she's not the main character in her own dream.
See, I was confused by the ending. I didn't know that was supposed to be her waking up from a dream. Because normally the way they do it in movies is it's like they cut to a shot of them, like mid-shot of them, and then they go, oh, and wake up, so then it's a dream. But with her, it's just like it sort of flashes back. So I thought it was like a flashback for an ironic effect, like look how things seemed at the beginning kind of effect. Except for I was too dumb to realize exactly what the irony was.
I know Cornfield on his commentary was saying that Brando wanted to change the ending, wanted to get away from that, and have him end it with Brando sitting on the suitcase filled with money, filled with the ransom money, while Richard Boone, who has been shot multiple times, but apparently still lives, he pulls him out into the surf, and the end of the movie was going to be Brando watching the surf carrying away Richard Boone's body. Allegedly he would probably drown at that point. That would have been an ending, but instead it was like, no, we can't do that. We have to. Robs the film of the surrealism, which Cornfield was really going for, and he's like, no, we can't do that. Also, at the same time, Cornfield was a little afraid of doing a kidnapping picture, because when he originally started to do this, there was still a real taboo, which seems odd to me because I can't even remember when the Lindbergh kidnapping took place, but it was like, no, we can't make a kidnapping picture because of the Lindbergh case. I'm like, really? I had never heard that before. Thank goodness that's not going anymore. Otherwise, the Coen brothers would not have a career.
I was like, had you heard of that? I've never even heard that was a thing.
Maybe that's where the expression too soon came in,
Yeah, I think it was like in the 1920s or something that kidnapping happened.
Yeah, and this whole idea of we're going to age up the girl, so it's not the Lindbergh baby, it's a young woman, and then also have, her sexual awakening kind of thing, but then we're going to add the twist ending to really distance ourselves from, this really happened. I was like, okay, it feels like you're fated for this to happen. It doesn't feel like we're going to be able to do anything else other than this is always going to happen no matter what, because of that look on Brando's face at the very end, that creepy smile that he gives her, which, again, the famous story of Brando wouldn't sit still for that scene, and they had to pull a frame from like an outtake and use that, which I love that that's a still frame at the end that takes us through the end credits. It's a little bit of a fuck you to Marlon Brando, I think.
I know some of the shots of his wig seem to be also, apparently, so he had just shot Reflections of the Golden Eye, right? And he had a military haircut for that. So because of the timing of the production, he couldn't grow his hair back. So they gave him this blonde wig, which it's kind of hard to watch. It's just him in this wig. I don't know if you had as visceral a reaction to the wig as I did, but it was painful to see him in that because he's beautiful. He had been on this health food kick, right? And he was in a fantastic condition, maybe the best condition of his life since, on the waterfront or what have you, or, streetcar. And, and then this wig, it's just kind of, I don't know. Am I obsessing too much about it?
No, the wig is weird looking. Also, why is he dressed like a beatnik?
I think it was to show off his physique that he was.
Because there's even one point where he's wearing a black turtleneck. And I'm like, what the hell is this? And that line is like, if you want to get freaky with her, don't do it with her, or whatever it was. That was funny. I wish this movie had been more Richard Lester-y almost. I think that would have helped it. Like with just bizarro edits into the future and into the back.
Well, it was more, I think they were going for something more Jean-Pierre Melville than Richard Lester.
Which is funny that I didn't know until I listened to that Cornfield commentary that Melville had a little bit of a hand in the production. And what was it? He stuck up for Cornfield, I think, with the kidnapping thing. Like they didn't want to have the kidnapping plot or something. And yeah, he stepped in and helped out, which I was like, really? Okay.
Maybe that's why they decided to make it a dream or suggest it could be a dream. It was like a workaround in terms of the kidnapping.
Yeah, that's what that Tim Lucas guy says. Is that what you said the commentator's name was? Yeah, he said that it was a way to like have all this bad stuff happen, and they go, it didn't really happen.
Just for the record, Lindbergh kidnapping March 1st, 1932. So you're very close. I thought it was a lot later than that, but nope, apparently not.
I was thinking the Lindbergh ended up being a fascist, right? So during the Nazi period, so didn't want America to get involved in World War II, etc. So the timing sounds about right, actually, 30s.
The whole idea of moving the story from New York City or New York outskirts over to like the beaches of Normandy and everything, I thought it actually worked. I like the idea of them being foreigners in this country and having that barrier for them that they don't seem to have too much trouble with the language, especially Rita Moreno seems very fluent when it comes to French. But I have to say that Boone and Brando seem to be pretty darn good as well. But there is that whole thing of like Brando says in that scene that we keep talking about, that they will cut your head off in a country like France or Belgium, or I guess this is France, for this kidnapping. So there's even more than just going to prison on the line here.
Vive la guillotine.
Yeah, and I was thinking, were the French tougher about stuff like that than in America? I don't think so.
Yeah, maybe they're super laid back about a lot of things, but not that one. I don't know. I talked about the kind of the artsiness of this, and the one thing that I really like about this film is that there's this theme of, with the audio, that we start off with Pamela Franklin with her headphones on and Rita Moreno talking to her and Franklin not being able to hear her, but we can hear Moreno. And then later on, there's stuff like, there's a conversation, I think, that happens when they're switching limousines and things. There's a lot of, obviously, hands over mouth to keep the kidnapping victim quiet, but there are quite a few scenes of somebody talking and us not being able to hear it, and like, who can hear these things, which I really like that whole idea. I think it's like when Brando picks her up at the limousine, he's talking, you can tell he's talking, but we don't hear anything. So it's this kind of nice through line of this film as far as who can hear what, as far as like privileged information, I suppose. And I like that we're kind of kept on the outside as the viewers, because I'm trying to remember if all of the French is subtitled or if it's just French.
I believe it was subtitled. You may be right though, Mike, because actually I don't have a great grip on French, but it's pretty decent. And so I think I could have just understood what Rita Moreno was saying. And maybe I just remembered that there was subtitles, but you may be right.
I don't think there was.
Because there's a scene when Boone is in the cab and he's coming back and he can't seem to understand what the radio broadcast is saying, and the cab driver has to translate it for him. And then eventually the cab driver moves into English and starts to talk about, these bastards, and starts to tear down the kidnappers right to one of the kidnappers' face. I do like, too, the audio use when it comes to the waves that we hear, or towards the beginning when we get to the cabin that they're hid out in, you can hear the thunder in the distance, though it sounds a lot like cannons to me. So I was appreciating also the sound mix, and I was listening to the movie in the car today and just hearing the waves crashing over and over again. I was like, that's pretty nice that they kind of keep you on edge with the sound effects that are happening as well.
Do we assume that everything was dubbed after too? Like in terms of audio, that the dialogue was dubbed after the fact? I'm not sure. They did that a lot in European films but and then because of some of the sound effects, like clattering of shoes on the floor, always feel a bit like they're getting their own microphone or something. They're so loud, and there seems to be such a sound, like a focus on that sound effect. I don't know. I was just wondering if maybe they redubbed the film after the fact. I'm not sure.
For some reason, I don't think that Brando would come back and do that. Doesn't seem like he'd be a big ADR guy.
You're probably right about that. Yeah.
And then even talking about the sound a little bit more, I also like that sound is the connection between the girl and her father, and that it's a tape that they have that they play to him. And then it's the phone conversation that they have. And I don't know when they first started to do the whole taping of the receiver to the one receiver to another to throw off where the phone call is actually originating from. But I really like that they were doing that with the phones. Though it was kind of weird where it's like, I can't hear what you're saying, but you're going to listen to me, because it was the way that it was taped. The mouthpiece was away from the earpiece at that point. I was like, really? You couldn't just like tape them together upside down? Why couldn't you do that, Jess Hahn? But so much for me. Not a kidnapper. I don't know best practices.
I didn't think about that. I like how the whole technology looks. It looks really cool.
That was considered pretty high tech at the time, I'm sure.
Tape and two phones. Look out.
And I was wondering if in that Peugeot kidnapping, the real kidnapping that the book inspired, I'm guessing there wasn't I didn't get all the way through the book. I read some of the book, but it seemed so different than the movie that I stopped. So I'm guessing there wasn't an explosion used that way to divert all the emergency attention.
I wouldn't think so, no. Yeah, apparently their kidnapping came off without a hitch, but it wasn't until months later when they got an anonymous tip about these two guys that were spending money like there was no tomorrow.
Yeah, in the Alps or something. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to be careful, man. It's like buying that fur coat after the Idlewild heist. You can't do that.
Take it back. Take it back. What did I say? Take it back.
So I was wondering if that was partly the reason they said it in France, along with the French New Wave kind of thing. But according to that Lucas guy, though, I think he said it was just because of the production company they used, and so they had to, for money reasons, and production reasons, it had to be there.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it's a beautiful location. The beach is amazing, and that they use the beach so well, using it at the climax of the film, and then just having, like I said, those waves crashing all the time, and just that sense of desolation. Like, you could scream your lungs out if you want, girl, and there's nobody that's going to hear you.
Yeah, and I feel like I've seen that avenue of plane trees they drive down in so many great New Wave movies. When they're driving to the beach house, they go down this one avenue that's with the plane trees on either side. And I was like, I've seen that. I think that was in For Our LeFou, which was another movie inspired by Lionel White.
Yeah, though I've read Obsession and then I've watched Peugeot LeFou, and I'm like, no, not really.
Well, I said inspired.
Right. It's as inspired by that as Made in America is inspired by the Richard Stark novel. It's not. And Lionel White's name never comes up in the credits as far as I saw.
Oh, yeah, I don't think I paid attention to the credits.
How bizarre. Like was there a writers union at the time?
I don't know. I don't know if that was necessary, because there are a lot of times where I'll watch older films and then find out, oh, this was based on a book. Whereas now it's like, based on the book by, or, the whatever credit it is, much more prominent. Yeah, I was paying attention during the credits just because they were so odd, and the Night of the Following Day title card that comes up, title credit, it takes forever to fade out. I was like, oh, I've never seen credit do that before. Just, it was different timed than all of the other credits. And then you kind of get those like double exposures over her. And you get double exposures quite a few times in here. There's that. There's when Brando and Moreno are going at it, which was interesting. But then it was odd the way that that sequence stops with him at the typewriter. And it's like too quick of a cut from him at the typewriter to Boone with the paper and pulling the paper out. I was just like, oh, that really technically was not a very good cut at all right there.
Thought that sort of edit was done because the way that you have the seduction of Marlon Brando, it pulls you out of that and reminds you that this is manipulation for this plot.
Like walking out of a bedroom with your pants unbuckled. And it's like, when do you do that? Come on.
Yes. Oh, Jesus.
He was awakened by a scream, so.
Yeah, that was just a little too much of a bridge too far, where it's like, oh, he just so happens to fix his belt outside of this young girl's room, and Rita Moreno is not having any of it, and ends up with that amazing slap fight that they have.
It's kind of due to her performance, which was pretty straightforward. She I think gave a very just sturdy performance, and it is sort of, it does hold the film together more than almost anybody else's performance. Her intentions, her motivations in this film, and she gives a solid performance. But I'm wondering, here's my theory possibly, they had this kind of mess of a film to put together, and they thought, well, what if we make this in a kind of a surreal experimental type of film, and that'll be just sort of our cure-all for all the kind of, problems that we have with the film, performances, plotline issues, etc. This is like a way of dealing with that. And those kind of films were pretty popular coming out of the French Nouveau in the 60s. So maybe that's what we have here.
Yeah, it could be like dream contradictions. It's like, we didn't see that Boone guy slapping what's-her-name around, but that's okay because it's all a dream, that kind of thing.
Yeah, just the different POVs, and yeah, it's dreamy too, and the drug use. I've never seen, apparently that was heroin that she was snorting. I
was confused at first too. You're like,
no, it's heroin.
Yeah.
Really thought it was cocaine. I never remember that you can snort heroin as well.
Which I guess she does just to trick them into thinking she's not using again.
Right, because she doesn't have any needle marks. She's there to show her arms, and then she has to make up the lie about the sleeping pill. I think that Moreno really is the glue that holds this whole movie together, and if we had more of her, this would be a better film. If it was more from her POV, but she never talks to the girl. She'll talk around the girl. I don't know if she even has one line to the girl.
Yeah, there's that weird reaction that she has when Boone steps on Pamela Franklin's toe in that interesting edit. And you can tell from the looks that she exchanges with Boone that she knows he did it on purpose to hurt her, and is even slightly amused by it.
And she doesn't seem to have any opinions about stuff. It's not like we've got Brando, like, this caper's over. No, like, I'm not going to deal with this psychopath that you brought on, blah, blah, blah. And she just seems to be going along with it. I mean, she definitely is angry at Brando for, quote unquote, sleeping with the girl, though he didn't at that point. And really, I love the whole stuff of her with the fisherman / policeman. I think that those moments are some of the best moments, especially when the policeman helps her fix her windshield wipers and gets out into the pouring rain to fix her windshield wipers. That moment for me is like, oh, wow. It feels like he's very Columbo. It feels like he knows what's going on from the very beginning. I don't know how much of that is true or not, but it feels like he's just doing this, like, I'm going to debase myself by getting out of this car and getting soaked and fixing your windshield wipers just so you think that I'm this harmless dolt of a policeman, but I really have my eye on you. Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's another movie going on somewhere in there in that film, right? There's this whole potentially really strong and traditional movie. Maybe, I think those that do like this film like it because it's not traditional, but I think the three of us are sort of like wishing we could see a more traditional approach to this film. I mean, you have Rita Moreno, and she really is dynamic, charismatic. She's fantastic. She's coming out of sort of a self-imposed slump, right? After West Side Story, she's hoping to hit more mainstream Hollywood or be cast more mainstream in Hollywood. And of course, it's Hollywood. So she's being offered nothing but pretty stereotypical Latina roles, nothing very exciting for her. And so she sort of gets married and leaves Hollywood for all intents and purposes until, of course, Brando enters the picture. And I think he could have gotten just about anyone to come out of retirement to be in a movie with him.
After they had a long history together.
They were like involved for several years, even when he would get married and divorced. And then he made her have an abortion, and then she nearly killed herself. And that was it between them for a long time until he called her up to be in this movie. And one of the good things about Brando is he made sure not only that she got the part, because he thought she should be acting again, but he also made sure that she got paid well because they wanted to give her nothing. And that was one of the great things about him. Like when he would be in movies, he would really fight for the people of color and lower people to get good salaries and not be paid in the chintzy way they would pay people of color, which I thought was cool.
And women, I mean, she had everything going against her.
Yeah, he knocked her up. She ended up having to have an abortion or had an abortion.
Well, he pressured her into it. I think this was a few years before.
Yeah, I think it was more like 1950s, like early parts of both of their careers.
Yeah, somewhere around 1960, I think, is where I gathered the abortion took place.
Her first credited role is 1950, which is wild to think that she had already worked for 10 years before West Side Story.
And she was Singing in the Rain.
And she's still acting.
Exactly. And she's made so many movies and TV shows over the last 10 years would put any other actress to shame. It's wild.
One thing I wanted to bring up about her performance when you were talking before, Mike, in the scenes with the cop, a lot of that stuff really reminded me, and the way Adam had mentioned how she has this very worked out, very precise sort of performance that she gives, and it reminded me a lot of the kind of work that Janet Leigh did in Psycho with the cop, and same sort of cool professional exterior with the kind of desperation and panic underneath it. And Rita Moreno really brings that out. And like Adam's saying, it's much stronger. Every time she's on the screen, you feel like it's going somewhere and that she's taking you somewhere.
Well, there's that incredible moment when the cop is talking with her and she's in the car. And yeah, I totally see what you're talking about as far as the Janet Leigh and the cop with the mirrored sunglasses that is questioning her after she slept there. And she does this thing where she suddenly becomes really sad and starts to cry and talk about how, because the cop thinks that Brando is her boyfriend or lover, because he thinks that Boone is her husband. And so she starts to cry. And then, she switches from that into another emotion, and you just see all of these things play out. It only takes less than a minute for this scene to run, and you just see all of these different things that she's doing, trying to manipulate the cop, manipulate, the audience, basically. And it was just like, wow, this is fantastic. She is just doing such a great job.
Yeah. The only thing that was disappointing was, like you said, since she doesn't have interactions with Pamela Franklin, and you don't even... maybe because of a traditional sort of idea about gender, it's you keep looking to her thinking she'll be sympathetic to Pamela Franklin and that will pull you to her. So she'll be the one kidnapper that you can kind of identify with. But the movie keeps wanting to identify with Brando, and he doesn't feel consistent enough for you to know what he's doing. Even in that weird scene, you're talking about that leads up to it, he's got to get back to the house within an hour to keep Boone from doing his thing, which frankly, I think by that point he should have known Boone was just going to do his thing and that there's not this hour limit because Calvin Prees, criminal doesn't stick to his word.
I'm telling you, Rita Moreno is in some other movie. Gee, there's two movies going on here at the same time. That's its flaw, but it's still very compelling. Did you find it still with all these flaws we're talking about? I still feel totally compelled. You can't take your eyes off Brando. I think there is one or two moments where he hams it up, but he's still,
"You gotta get us all killed."
Yes, the exact scene was a little bit, yikes.
Yeah, no, I do find it compelling. Even like we're talking about, is it technical mistakes or is it French New Wave, which could be the title of a podcast just dedicated to Jean-Luc Godard. There are moments in this movie that are out of focus, and they seem to be out of focus not on purpose. It feels like they just...
Like the driving stuff.
Yeah, it feels like they just didn't have their shit together. There's a lot of parts I think in that conversation with Brando that we keep going back to.
Well, I wonder how many days they had on this shoot. Do you know, Mike?
I don't think that many, but I don't know how many they had. Yeah.
Clearly they did not have enough money.
The director said how many was it? Was something like 30-something days, I think, that they had to do it.
And they've got a lot of setups in this. I mean, there are so many times. I'm very curious the order that they shot these things, because we should say to the audience that there are many times where it's like, okay, now you're following Rita Moreno's story. Now you're following Marlon Brando's story. Now you're following Richard Boone's story. And occasionally, Jess Hahn will show up in each of these. He really doesn't seem to have a story of his own, even though he's got that little line where he's just like, hey, I've been doing this for all these years. And it almost seems like he's very fatalistic in that he knows he's going to get caught instead of killed like he ends up getting. But he's like, at the end of the day, don't you wish you just had enough money for car fare? And it's like, okay, yeah, you're really aiming low. Like, you should be thinking this is going to be a much more successful operation. But anyway, always cutting back and forth between all of these stories, and sometimes they will run for a long time. Like, there's a whole thing where Rita Moreno sees Brando coming out of the bedroom where the girl was and then fixing his pants. And then he goes down and he has a conversation with Han, and that takes a long time. And then when he comes back up, she's angry. And I was like, what is she angry about? Oh yeah, she saw, that was a while ago that happened.
It does seem like that in a real emotional thing, she just would have immediately went out and confronted him with it. But that would screw, I guess, with the story stuff where Brando's maybe going to pull out and then doesn't. And so then has the emotional backing he needs to manipulate Rita Moreno the way that he does. Because it's also weird too how she's just packing and she's going to leave. And you're like, all these people can't abandon in the middle of a kidnapping.
I didn't realize that the night of the following day means the title comes from that this whole caper is 2 days. Because it feels like this has gone on for like 10, 12, 15 days.
It does kind of. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah.
The scene where we were just about to describe where he does walk back into the room with Rita Moreno and she lets out, he finally has this opportunity, this gift to take out her anger at Brando, and she just, wallops him. And then I don't know if she knew he was going to hit her back even, but he catches her off guard.
I went through the memoir and read the entire description of her relationship with Brando and the making of the film. It's good, by the way. Everyone should read her memoir. It's got very sassy and well written.
It's sassy.
Yeah, there's about 1,000 books on Marlon Brando, and most of them don't even give this one more than a paragraph. And if they do, it's not very nice what they say about it.
I've looked at two different ones. One had like a few pages on it and the production, and mostly it blamed the director, which I didn't think was fair. I think Brando, if he's a professional, should do the job he was handed and not rewrite the script halfway through. Even if he thinks it's crap, he should do what he's supposed to do, and then he can bitch about it later.
On a personal level, I feel like, yeah, I agree with you. But on a business level, or, I feel like, that the director couldn't pull it together. He did not have control over this film. It's what it feels like. And I do feel like ultimately it has to, rest on his shoulders, and so I don't know. I'm a little torn about that. I kind of feel like Brando's Brando. You can't cast Brando and not expect to get Brando.
I mean, I guess if I'd heard stories about him, I would agree. I didn't know he would go this far and doing stuff like trying to sleep with your wife and throwing it in your face. Like,
that seemed a little extreme there. Yeah.
I mean, I guess I myself might not be too professional at that point.
Let me write this down next time I'm working on a film set.
No trying to seduce the director's wife.
But you're right. The director wasn't able to control him and he couldn't fire him. And so he ate it. And that's probably the worst. That's the worst part of it is he ate it. He should have figured out a way to probably John Huston his ass or something. But it would require a lot of testosterone, I think.
And the problem is, he's not John Huston.
True. I didn't mean to make a qualitative comparison between the two.
No, it's good. I'm glad you did, because, you look at somebody like John Huston who figured out how he, who worked with some of the biggest egos and greatest actors of the day, and managed to almost never make anything that failed.
Yeah, and usually they would come out respect. I think like John Huston was the only director in that period that Brando liked. And to be honest, I prefer this movie to Reflections in a Golden Eye, which I think is a hysterical and very unpleasant to watch film.
I remember liking it when I saw it, though it definitely felt strange. It felt very, very strange.
And I watched that gold version.
Yes, same here.
And it's like, I didn't like the gold.
Yeah, it was a choice. It definitely was a choice.
I mean, I can see that Brando's doing more acting in that film, consistent with what's going on than whatever he's doing in Night, but I don't know. Also, I really love Pamela Franklin. That was one thing too I was annoyed with, is that I was hoping to get a really good Pamela Franklin movie, and she just doesn't matter.
I'm surprised that Richard Boone wasn't the problem, because Boone was infamous for drinking. I know by the time he was making Winter Kills, it was very tough to get a performance out of him, which I know is still, it's probably like 7 years later.
He was fired off that or his last film, right? Wasn't that what I think I read?
I think you're right. I have talked more about Richard Boone over the last 3 years than I ever thought I would, because he ended up getting a lot of work from Rankin and Bass, and I do a podcast on Rankin and Bass. So he was in The Bushido Blade. He was the voice of Smaug in The Hobbit. He was in an amazing film, which I cannot recommend enough, called The Last Dinosaur, where he played a character named Maston Thrust Jr.
Maston Thrust.
I think I saw it when I was like 10.
Yes, Maston Thrust Jr. And spoiler alert, he's actually the last dinosaur.
He has like a great craggy alcoholic character actor's face, that's for sure.
Rita Moreno would go on to work with him again in Heck Ramsey, if memory serves. So this was a few years before he was on that TV wheel with Columbo and Banachek and those guys doing Heck Ramsey. He was one of the first ones, but unfortunately it was only 10 episodes.
That's probably where he's most familiar to me from. The one thing I liked a lot that was disorienting and dreamy was at the end when Brando basically gets out of, he wants them to drive up to the house without him so that Boone will not get them. And then, of course, he just kills them, which I loved that, by the way. That just was so disorientingly funny and pointless and end the Rita Moreno's thing. And then when he chases down Richard Boone, you assume he's behind Richard Boone when he shoots him, and then he's really at the water's edge in front of him. And I was like, that was really weird. That's probably my favorite thing like that in the movie.
Apparently, Cornfield was very into making Richard Boone look like a Magritte painting as he's walking across the beach, and he's got the bowler hat and the umbrella, and he just looks like this very out of place character. And he was like, oh yeah, I was really going for Magritte with this. So I was like, okay, that's kind of cool.
And you're like, and you're doing that because why?
I was really shocked when, speaking of opening credits, when Al Lettieri's name came up.
Oh, we can't leave out Al Lettieri.
Yeah, I was so surprised to see that. And then when he shows up in the movie, I was like, holy shit, this is great.
The Godfather connection, like the music thing that sounds sort of like The Godfather.
Oh yeah, I couldn't get over that music. The music has this motif that sounds like it's going to break right into the Godfather theme, but it gets 4 or 5 notes in and then takes a turn. But every time it played, I was just like, oh, the Godfather. Nope, no, it's not the Godfather.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad that you heard that, because I was like, maybe I'm crazy.
I don't know how Al Lettieri got producer credit on this film, but it may have been their collaboration between Al and Brando. Maybe that is how he ends up playing Saluzzo in The Godfather some years later.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was something. I'm not sure. I wish that there was a really good biography of Lettieri, because he seems like a very fascinating guy, because I've seen him.
But it would be a short one, sadly.
Yeah, he died when he was, 46 or something?
46, 47 of alcoholism, yeah.
Because wherever he shows up, it's always interesting. Like, I really like him in Mr. Majestic, when he's in The Getaway. I mean, he's terrific. He had a very small amount of roles, but they were all very powerful. And yeah, it looks like he definitely knew Brando around this time, so I wouldn't be surprised if that was the connection that got him the role.
Yeah, and he would play heavies, but usually heavies with just a little bit more going on, more dimension to the character. You know, whether it was humor or intelligence, he was a good actor. He's just not going to deliver a one-dimensional, performance. But he had a very small role in this as the pilot, and
yeah, that confused me too when he gets killed, I guess,
with the karate chops.
Yeah, with the karate chops, like the old "and loving it, Chief." Hiya! Right, knocked him right out.
And I guess that means that Boone was working with some other people that we never saw.
I think he was just going out on his own. I think he decided.
But there's people flashing in the light. Who's that?
Oh, good point. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, he's got to have some way.
I'll tell you who they were. They were future dead people. They were going to be. They weren't going to make it back to the shore. Trust me. Whoever was in the boat out there waiting for him.
Right. That's what I was thinking. He must have had a whole separate plot to betray them that was going on that we never learned about.
Him being killed by Brando before making it to the boat was the luckiest thing that, whoever was in that boat was able to survive, but they probably would have made, because I think he was trying to erase all of the tracks.
He knew what all of their moves were and was able to then play that against all of them and try to, that and have his fun with the girl. And that, to me, I think it's really effective that they don't show us exactly what happened to the girl, and that they don't show us too much of her. You get to see some looks like red marks on her back, and I'm like, are those cigarette burns? You know that he tortured the shit out of her, probably raped her, and
yeah, it's good that we didn't see that. But on the other hand, you're like, well, that was another failed opportunity to get us involved with Pamela Franklin.
Even if they did quick flashes of some of the damage and you don't really know exactly where it's at, just to show us that there was more going on. But I think we have in the theater of our heads that what he did was not good at all.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and did you notice too, this is relating to that guy Boone and how he did the first aggressive acts to Pamela Franklin when he stepped on her foot while she was eating. And you notice that Jess Hahn uses that same move on the guy at the cafe. And I was wondering, so is that a thing that they do?
Right. Yeah, that's our signature move.
Because he stepped on, whose foot was that he stepped on at the cafe? I can't remember. And I noticed you pointed out a similar, when you wrote about this to me, pointed out a similar confusion I had. Did the father die or not?
Right. Yeah. I don't really know if he did or not, because that whole, when things go tits up, as they say, it was just a mess. And okay, what just happened here? I was very sad when Jacques Marin died in the film, because I always appreciate seeing him show up. And when he did, I was just like, oh, hey, he's one of these great familiar faces that you've seen 1,000 times. And I mostly remember him from Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo when I was growing up, because I saw that movie probably 1,000 times.
Yeah, that was funny. That was another very forced complication at the cafe when he is pulls out his gun and then a bunch of shooting. Although I did like it, that it just killed everybody. That seemed fun. Seems sort of a Tarantino thing to do.
I was reminded of The Big Lebowski while I was watching this film, because of Brando's line about how he's going to stick that burp gun up Richard Boone's nose and pull the trigger. And I was just like,
let me tell you something, Pandeo. You pull any of your crazy shit with us, you flash your piece out on the lanes, I'll take it away from you and stick it up your ass and pull the fucking trigger till it goes click.
it's a neo-noir, and it's very much a noir book that it's based on, hard-boiled book that it's based on, and this whole thing. And I found it interesting that the guy who wrote the intro to the book, Rich Olderman, his definition of film noir is the definition that I have become used to, though he makes it nicer. The mind is always, you start off the story fucked and you end up more fucked at the end. And that's totally this. These people are not in a good spot at the beginning of the movie, and they are dead by the end of it. Or, I don't know what Brando's going to do after this, but that girl's going to need a lot of therapy.
Yeah, that was a nice twist. I actually would agree that Brando's version of the ending would be interesting, because unlike most of the films like The Killing or something, it's like where the money is ironically lost, or like the Treasures of the Sierra Madre, that sort of thing. It'd be interesting if everyone's dead, but the last guy standing and he has all the money. Like, that's an interesting idea.
He's got the money, he's got the girl, he's got the power.
And all the rivals are gone.
And he's got the wig. Oh, and we didn't mention, because you started, Mike, you started off talking about the different characters, the fact that they're, known in the credits as these very just almost, how would you describe the most generic, right? Titles.
Like archetypes. Yeah.
Yeah, archetypes. So, but he's called Bud at certain points, right? Which is his Marlon Brando's actual real life nickname. Like, his friends called him Bud. And there might be something a bit, I don't know, sort of telling about that he goes by that name in the film. But talk about like the power struggle there.
Yeah, I mean, since he was kind of buddies with like Boone and probably some of the other people. Oh yeah, and of course Rita. Yeah, and then he has that other.
I don't know if they were buddies, but they have. Yeah.
Then he has that real name he has that Boone calls him, and you're like, what?
Lochinvar.
Lochinvar, that's right. And I'm like, that's interesting. I guess that would be the real name that he goes by. Tim Lucas was like, we've never heard this before, and it's a whole new surprise for us to hear it.
Right. But he called him that twice, so Tim shouldn't have been too surprised. Tim needed a little help with his commentary. He needs to know what diegetic versus non-diegetic music means.
That's right. I noticed that.
He also needs to know that Rita Moreno was on Electric Company, not Sesame Street, so...
I did catch that one.
He also claimed that, by the way, you talked about how they were named like the chauffeur and blah, blah, blah in the credits. He talked about how that came from a French type of novel, the new novel, Hélène Robbe and people like that wrote. But I was thinking that went back to German Expressionism, where they would call them just like the man, the girl, the kind of thing that Kafka had been influenced by. And there's something not exactly Kafka about the movie, but like distance like him. But I do like that aspect of the movie. Like I'm bitching about it, but I did enjoy this movie.
I totally enjoyed it as well. I wouldn't have watched it, multiple times and listened to all the commentaries and all that had I not enjoyed it. A lot of it was, why is this the way that it is? I'm always fascinated by the making of movies. How did we end up with this? Would have been, the original version, what happened here and there? What was the whole production history? You get a little bit of that from this stuff and from all the materials, but it's still a mystery.
It's tight. It's taut. It's short. Compared to, a lot of movies at the time. And, it's unpredictable. You do not know what's going to happen from scene to scene, moment to moment, which, is also a criticism of it.
Except for the cop, he's going to die. The second I saw him, I was like, he's going to get it.
I thought that he might have foiled their whole thing, because he does seem smarter than they are. And he does seem to always be where they're at. And she even says, like, this is not a coincidence. He was here. It's like, yeah, no, I don't think it is a coincidence, Rita. I think that.
But he's flirting with her, see? And the flirting thing, when he thinks she's married, he's getting it.
And I think the filmmakers, the director, Brando, probably a number of the other, anybody who was in the actor studio, they all spoke French and they were all fans of French films. We know that. So I'm sure they were trying to pull something off. Peut-être.
One thing that Lucas said that I found interesting was that originally they were thinking they were going to make this movie in two languages, that it would be English and French, since they could all speak French. But I could not find anything to back that one up, and Cornfield didn't mention that whatsoever either. It would have been kind of neat.
Turns out it's all Greek.
I kept thinking while I was watching this movie, I kept thinking of another film called And Hope to Die, which ironically is based on a David Goodis novel. It came out a few years after this. It came out in 1972. I want to say it's also in France, and it's also a kidnapping movie. I think there's a couple different versions of it. There was a UK version. I think that was 125 minutes, but the original version was like 141 minutes, which really, I mean, both versions outstay their welcome. I love the book that it's based on. It's very loosely based on Black Friday, which again is a bunch of people sitting around a hideout and all of the tensions that come from being in an enclosed space with all of these ruffians and thugs and waiting for the next thing to happen for this caper to be successful. I just found that to be pretty ironic that both of these, based on these old hard-boiled books, adapted all these years later, having these international casts, because the cast for And Hope to Die is amazing. It's got Jean-Louis Trintignant, Robert Ryan, Aldo Ray. It's pretty neat, but...
Who's the director? Carnet or?
René Clément.
And was good as the guy who wrote the Shoot the Piano Player book?
Yes, David Goodis, yeah. Yeah, all the way back to Dark Passage with Humphrey Bogart, Call Joint, yeah.
Where you could just get plastic surgery and look like Bogart.
Yes, exactly. Could make you look like a bulldog.
That's a good trashy movie.
That's a great trashy movie, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, this whole idea of the criminals all hold up. And I like in the book, you mentioned the Lionel White book, and I like in there that it's not heroin, it's not cocaine, it's not anything other than alcohol. And just the way that the ringleader basically has like a small amount that he gives to the people in his group, like trying to keep them a little bit more dry through this. There's that moment in the movie where Vi and Wally, so Han and Moreno, are at a bar, and she orders scotch. He changes the order, but then she quickly changes it back before the waiter walks away. I thought that was kind of a nice thing that she's like pulled one over on him in order to get that drink, because she really likes to drink. She really likes to be out of her head on substances.
Yeah. I was thinking that thing, by the way, you mentioned the book. In the book at the beginning, I think the chauffeur character is like very sadistic and has beaten up the teenage girl or whatever. That's the nanny or whatever. And I was thinking that's where Boone's thing comes from.
Yeah, it's like they took the Brando character and like kind of took the chauffeur and kind of split him into two pieces, but then those pieces were kind of there already. Yeah, I think that's Gino is the guy's name. The same guy who goes in to the little girl in this one, well under 18, and masturbates over her bed and wakes her up by, oh boy, that's pretty early in the proceedings, man. Oh boy.
I mean, I quit pretty quick once I saw how different the movie and the book were. Because the book is like, I like the way the book too started with it already, the kidnapping already done.
That was nice. I like that they're just waiting for them to come back.
Yeah. Instead of like elaborating on it. I guess you kind of have to in a movie though.
I was very surprised when Gino goes in. I can't remember what, everybody else is distracted with other things. He goes in and he's caressing her shoulder. And the way that White describes it basically, he never says that Gino pulls out his dick and starts to masturbate, but just the way that he writes it, you're like, oh, okay, this is what's really going on. And then when he climaxes, he grabs the girl by the shoulder and wakes her up. And then one of the guys, Dent, I think the character's name is, comes in and it's like, the fuck are you doing type of thing. And it's like, oh, he collapsed to the ground. I was like, okay, boy, he must have really had a good orgasm.
I don't know about you, but I think that is inappropriate. FYI, no, you should not do that.
Oh, yeah, I would not condone that.
You're going to have a lot of disclaimers to make, Mike, here on this episode.
And the book was from 1953. I almost said it was his first book, but he had one other before that, Seven Hungry Men. And he always liked to use punctuation, like exclamation marks in his title. So there's Seven Hungry Men with an exclamation mark. Then there's Run, Killer, Run, also with an exclamation mark. His stuff is great. Read a few of his books, and I really like Lionel White. So that's one reason why when Vaughn requested this movie, I was just like, oh, wow, this is based on a Lionel White. I finally get to track down the book and read this one, because I've read Clean Break, a.k.a. The Killing, I don't know how many times. Man, oh man, what a book. I mean, even the structure, that kind of fragmented structure that we have in the movie, it's right there in the book.
But didn't they say the ending was different though in the book?
I think it is. Again, it's been a little while, but I'm due for a reread because I like that one so much. And now knowing a little bit more about some of the adaptations, I didn't realize just how many movies have been made off of his books. It's one of those, like, looking at IMDb in 1997 versus looking at it today and being like, oh yeah, they've put in a lot more information. So like The Big Caper is one that I really want to see. Rafferty, it was a Soviet film that was based on one of his books. I'm like, yeah, please let me see that. And there's one looks wild called The Heir, and it looks like it's from Finland.
And that's the other version of Obsession, right?
I think that's like the proper version of it, because there's nothing from Obsession that's inside of Godard's film. Just nothing. There's no painting your face blue. There's none of that stuff is in there. So don't go looking for answers in that one.
But the painting your face blue, that does seem Brando-y in this movie. I could see Brando doing that with this wig. He could take his wig off and put it in blue and
right. And Godard could have also have made this film. He might have made it better.
It would have been a lot more groovy.
Though the soundtrack definitely tries to be groovy. I was so surprised that there's not a soundtrack album for this, because this is music wall to wall in here. This kind of free jazz expression. And I'm like, oh, okay. No, again, we talked about that intro by Allerman, and man, oh man, he had nothing good to say about the music in this one. And so I was kind of tuned into it.
Or the sound in general. He thought all of the voices were overdubbed, and he thought the music was too perky. I didn't think it was that perky. It seemed wistful, lost, I thought, for the most part. But and also he talked about he hated the use of the ocean that you were talking about. But I like it. I'm with you. I think it's well done.
Yeah, I think I definitely liked it more than he did. And maybe if you're a Lionel White purist, maybe that's your thing. But yeah, I found a lot of stuff in here to enjoy. And I think I would recommend this to folks.
I recommend it to some people, but not to everybody. Because like people that are going to want to see a movie where you have kidnapping and you're involved and it's suspenseful about whether or not that person's going to make it or get free, this movie's not going to satisfy you.
No, they have to be ready for something far more experimental and offbeat, a curiosity.
Yeah, but movie people are definitely, like people who are into moviness, I would definitely recommend it.
Yeah, and I think that this should be more than just a footnote for the Brando people, that there really needs to be more talked about and written about this movie, because, like I said, it's a fascinating failure.
Like, there's a couple of other movies of his where you're like, whoa, those really never need to be seen again.
Like Candy. And he wore another wig.
Which he made right before this. Well, it was Reflections right before. Candy was after, maybe.
Yeah, I think actually they said he had to leave for a week to take care of that.
But he didn't wear the wig in Candy?
No, it was a different wig. It was a long-haired, he was a guru in Candy.
Oh, that's right, yeah. I had read it, he was a guru in it.
I watched that movie once.
Much better wig.
I mean, I'm thinking of like some of his earlier films, or even like there's this one where he's like involved with a Japanese woman in the military. That thing is awful.
He plays a Japanese person, right?
Was it? Oh, probably. That's right. I think Rita Moreno talked about how he was such a good actor that he thought he could do that. I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah, I don't remember if that. I think that was Tea House of the August Moon, which was made right before Sayonara. It was like his little Japanese period.
Yeah, maybe it was just a reason to meet Asian ladies. She said that he only liked women of color generally, so.
It was interesting, Rita Moreno having the blonde hair and then him having the blonde hair. So when they talk about two of the group being brother and sister, I was like, they're not brother and sister, are they? Even though they're both blonde. But Thank goodness, no, they weren't.
Well, that would have been another complication.
Oh boy, yeah.
Exactly. You wouldn't have been wrong for that to have entered your mind for a moment in this particular film. Maybe it's a bridge too far for this.
Yeah, I'm not sure why you would give Rita Moreno that kind of hair, but I mean, she did a great job through the hair.
Well, I think she was not playing a Latina, so maybe that was partly what went into it.
But she could still be not Latina and have her regular hair.
But just to emphasize, any student of Brando films really should, if they haven't seen this, I would definitely go out of my way to recommend it. I think it also falls in a very interesting period of time in Hollywood, and the background about the movie is really just fascinating. And all the people, this period of he's barely in his 40s here. He's, and he's getting ready for a whole other trajectory here in his career that, no one could have possibly have seen coming. I mean, it's just really just an amazing time.
It's really weird to hear that he was thinking about retiring when he's, like you said, I think he was 43 at this time. And he was like, oh, I'm going to get back and, do all this stuff for like Black people. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Obviously he didn't do that because he would go into Burn I think that came out the same year, The Nightcomers. And then, like you said, his whole different trajectory with The Godfather.
Maybe 3 years later, they're already shooting The Godfather. Think about what he looks like in The Night of the Following Day.
Oh, he's a golden god in this one.
Yeah. And like 2, maybe 3 years later, he's playing, Corleone. I mean, what an incredible change.
I wonder why he didn't decide to do more stage. That might have been more fulfilling to him.
That's a really good point, though. I know with stage, you say what's on those pages. Like the idea of improv.
Over and over and over and over and over and over.
Improv is not really going to do it.
Complete anathema. Even though that's his background, that's, Yeah,
it's just that he seemed to hate so much the whole Hollywood thing.
I don't know. I think he just wanted to change it, and he did.
Yeah, he definitely did.
Between him and Kazan, right? They changed Hollywood. Hey, Mike, so how many Brando films do you feel like, how many years have you been doing the projection booth now?
12.
Okay, Film Wax too, by the way. How many Brando movies do you think have been included in those 12 years, would you guess?
For me, I can only remember one, which was
what?
One-Eyed Jacks.
Really?
Yeah.
That's the only other Brando movie you've done on the projection booth?
Yeah, that's it.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I haven't seen.
When you do Candy, though, just remember me.
All right, we'll do. Sorry,
and Joseph too.
I take it back.
Thank you.
Because we also talked about Superman.
Yeah, which is great.
Oh, and I take it back again because we also talked about Apocalypse Now. So I don't tend to think of those.
He gets so.
What's the one? The Island one? The Island of Moreau? Did you do one about that?
I did an interview with the director of the documentary about that Island of Dr. Moreau. So we haven't actually talked about that, though we are going to be talking about Island of Lost Souls in a few months here, and I will totally be talking about Island of Dr. Moreau again, and especially Brando.
Well, I think your next one should be Guys and Dolls,
which I don't think I've ever seen. So
really, yeah, that would be one I would put in the.
Well, you're in for a treat. Again, a curiosity, but it's a tough one. It's a tough one.
Yeah, it's weird seeing him try to say it, but it does have Gene Simmons in it, and I love her.
All right, guys, let's go ahead and take a break and play a preview for next week's show.
Get Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem on digital today. After years of hiding, the Turtle Brothers set out to gain acceptance as normal teenagers and take on an army of mutants in this hilarious action-packed adventure. Buy or rent Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem on digital today and get over 40 minutes of bonus content when you buy on digital. Available at participating retailers. Rated PG from Paramount Pictures.
take no lip from nobody.
Yeah, that's the stuff. Hit 'em hard and quick. We ain't afraid of nothing and nobody, are we?
Legions for the Black Legion. Come on, what's the matter with
God,
you?
Scope.
Soldier of the Black Legion, you see before you an instrument of death. We give you this half as a symbol of our trust. The other half you will receive the day you betray that trust.
You've been lying to me.
Don't you call me a liar.
You're Frank. You did have something to do with all those terrible things. You and those new friends of yours.
You shut up about my friends.
I won't. Only a bunch of dirty, contemptible cowards would do a thing like that.
Why, you... Then kill me for telling you. Them Black Legion guys don't fool.
I'm not fooling either. You're gonna quit that gang.
I can't get out. Nobody ever lived to get out of the Legion.
Stop him! Don't let him get away! Don't let him get away!
That's right. We'll be back next week with another listener request, Black Legion. Until then, I want to thank my co-hosts, Joseph and Adam. So, Adam, what's the latest with you, sir?
Like I just said before the break, I am still podcasting through the ages here. You know, as long as you're up there, I gotta continue, Mike. You know, you're an inspiration. Filmwax continues. I think I just did my 770 something episode. I mean, you know. And what else? I'm doing work with these guys at the Woodstock Film Festival, which is closer to my new home up here in the Hudson Valley. I moved up here a few years back, and also working in radio. But people could find me. They're at Filmwax Radio on any social media platform. I'm not as active in the Twitterverse anymore for obvious reasons.
Yeah,
but I'm getting Filmwax on Threads. That's my last thing I'm going to do.
It's very admirable. I have yet to conquer Threads. I have yet to really even crack that app open because I can't figure out why I need to.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I was being a little bit facetious about it all, but it's very easy to find Filmwax, and certainly I would, hope people might subscribe. Yeah.
And Joseph, what's happening with you, sir?
Everyone go buy my book on Carrie. As under Joseph Aisenberg. Also, I did the commentary track for the latest Shout Factory 4K Blu-ray disc on that. You're speaking about titles with exclamation points. My novel, Marriage Goes to the Movies, is going to hopefully come out soon. And so anyone that wants to know should at me at Herman Karlovich on Twitter. That's HERRMANN Karlovich, how it sounds.
That's quite a handle, sir.
It's from Nabokov.
Thank you so much, guys, for being on the show. Thanks to everybody for listening. If you want to hear more of me shooting off my mouth, check out some of the other shows that I work on. They are all available at weirdingwaymedia.com. Thanks especially to our Patreon community. If you want to join the community, visit patreon.com/projection booth. Every donation we get helps the projection booth take over the world.